If you don't know him yet, take a look. The deck was stacked against Ben Carson right from the start. Born into poverty, raised by a single mother in Detroit. But he beat the odds, graduating medical school and becoming one of the most respected neurosurgeons in the country. In 1987, Dr. Carson made history as the first surgeon to separate twin babies who were conjoined at the head. He was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom, and Dr. Carson's common sense speeches on hot topics like political correctness have some people hoping he'll make history again by running for president. Please welcome the author of One Nation, What We Can All Do to Save America's Future, Dr. Ben Carson.
Yeah.
Now, when you sort of look at the landscape, what are you seeing? What needs to be done that isn't being done?
Well, we have to help re-educate people about what America is. America is a land for, of, and by the people. It was a place where people were supposed to come to have dreams, to be able to realize those dreams, and we weren't supposed to be people who were managed. And actually, that's what people came here to escape from, people who told them what they could say, what they could do, where they could live, what they had to buy. That's not America, and that's not what led us to the pinnacle position in the world in record time. And so what we really want to do is create or recreate that can-do attitude that propelled us to the top, and not the what can you do for me attitude that will propel us to the bottom.
You have called Obamacare a threat to health, liberty, and financial stability. Why do you feel that way?
Well, recognize one of the things that is critical about the welfare of this nation is knowledge. And you need to be extremely well-read in lots of different areas. You need to understand what are the principles of freedom. One of the key factors in creating a government that is controlled, that has the ability to control the people, particularly if you look at the writings of neo-Marxists, healthcare. Number one on the list. Take control of people's healthcare, that makes them dependent. My point is not that we shouldn't provide healthcare for people. I very much believe that we have the ability to provide health care for everybody. We pay more than twice as much per capita for health care in this country as the next closest nation. There's a lot of waste, a lot of fraud. There are ways to do this where we leave the health care in the hands of the people and not in the hands of some faceless bureaucrat. But the way to fix that is not to create a gigantic government bureaucracy, which will be even bigger than the VA. And you put all these layers of bureaucrats between patients and the healthcare providers.
How do we fix that? I'm sorry, go ahead,
Well,
Jerry.
let me give you an example.
Go ahead.
Health savings accounts. In a health savings account, you, the individual, have the ability to spend the money the way you want to spend it. So you pick the doctor that you want to see. You have the services that you want to have, but it comes out of that. You sprain your ankle and you think you need an x-ray? That's coming out of your HSA. You know, you need a physical exam for a new job? That's coming out of your HSA.
What I'd like to see is a system where we have health savings accounts. Everybody in America has a health savings account. It can be populated with $2,000 every year. If you don't use it, it just continues to accumulate. And a third of it has to be designated for catastrophic or bridge insurance. And you give people the ability to shift funds within a family. So if one member of the family needs a little more, other members of the family can shift some of theirs to that individual. It makes every family their own insurance company, provides an enormous amount of flexibility. And when you die, you can pass it on to a family member. That would give us an enormous amount of flexibility because 80% of the encounters are going to be handled through the health savings account. You don't have a big burden on your major medical and your catastrophic insurance. So the cost of that will plummet, makes it much easier to acquire, and I would make that something that you could acquire from any place in the country, any place in the world if they met our insurance standards. Bring it into the free market, that makes it work much better. And I think that could be done for considerably less money than we're spending. Even if the government populates everyone's health savings account, All 315 million of us with $2,000 a year, that's $630 billion. That's not a whole lot compared to what we're spending now, and everybody would have health care. And you could always add more to it on your own. Your employer could add to it. Anybody could add it onto it, but everybody would have basic care. And that's what we're trying to do.
He loved Jesus. He has a compelling life story, and he is a distinguished man of science and healing. We hope that he can help us sort some things out. May I introduce the Director of Pediatric Neurosurgery at one of the world's great hospitals, Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, Dr. Benjamin Carson, Sr.
Thank you so much. I want to start by reading 4 texts which will put into context what I'm going to say. Proverbs 11:9. With his mouth, the godless destroys his neighbor, but through knowledge the righteous escape. Proverbs 11:12. A man who lacks judgment derides his neighbor, but a man of understanding holds his tongue. Proverbs 11:25. A generous man will prosper. He who refreshes others will himself be refreshed. And 2 Chronicles 7:14. If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven and will forgive their sins and heal their land. Now, it's not my intention to offend anyone. I have discovered, however, in recent years that it's very difficult to speak to a large group of people these days and not offend someone. And people walk around with their feelings on their shoulders waiting for you to say something. Did you hear that? And they can't hear anything else you say. The PC police are out in force at all times. I remember once I was talking to a group about the difference between a human brain and a dog's brain. And a man got offended. He said, you can't talk about dogs like that. But, people just focus in on that, completely miss the point of what you're saying. And we've reached a point where people are afraid to actually talk about what they want to say because somebody might be offended. What we need to do in this PC world is forget about unanimity of speech and unanimity of thought. And we need to concentrate on being respectful of those people with whom we disagree. And that's when I think we begin to make real progress. But PC is dangerous. Because you see, this country, one of the founding principles was freedom of thought and freedom of expression. And it muffles people. It puts a muzzle on them. And at the same time, keeps people from discussing important issues while the fabric of their society is being changed. And we cannot fall for that trick. And what we need to do is start talking about things that are important, things that were important in the development of our nation. In 1831, Alexis de Tocqueville came to America to study this country. The Europeans were fascinated. How could a fledgling nation, barely 50 years old, already be competing with them on virtually every level? This was impossible. De Tocqueville was going to sort it out. And he looked at our government, and he was duly impressed by the 3 branches of government. 4 now, because now special interest groups, but it was only 3 back in those days. And, he said, wow, this is really something. And then he said, but let me look at their educational system. And he was blown away. See, that anybody finishing the 2nd grade was completely literate. He could find a mountain man on the outskirts of society. The man could read the newspaper, could have a political discussion, could tell him how the government worked. If you really want to be impressed, take a look at the chapter on education in my latest book, America the Beautiful, which I wrote with my wife. In that education chapter, you will see questions extracted from a 6th grade exit exam from the 1800s. I doubt most college graduates today could pass that test. We have dumbed things down to that level. And the reason that that is so dangerous is because the people who founded this nation said that our system of government was designed for a well-informed and educated populace. And when they become less informed, they become vulnerable. Think about that. Our system of government, and that's why the education is so vitally important. Now, some people say, you're overblowing it, things aren't that bad. And you're a doctor, a neurosurgeon. Why are you concerned about these things? I've got news for you. 5 doctors signed the Declaration of Independence. Doctors were involved in the framing of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, a whole bunch of things. It's only been in recent decades that we've extracted ourselves, which I think is a big mistake. We need doctors and we need scientists, engineers. We need all of those people involved in government, not just lawyers. And I don't like to bring up problems without coming up with solutions. You know, my wife and I started the Carson Scholars Fund 16 years ago after we heard about a survey, an international survey, looking at the ability of 8th graders in 22 countries to solve math and science problems. And we came out number 21 out of 22, barely beat out number 22, very concerning. So we started giving out scholarships to students from all backgrounds for superior academic performance and demonstration of humanitarian qualities. We would give them money. The money would go into a trust. They would get interest on it. And when they went to college, they get the money. But also the school gets a trophy. Every bit as impressive as any sports trophies, goes right out there with the others. And we try to put them on the same kind of pedestal as we do the all-state athletes. Many teachers have told us when we put a Carson Scholar in their classroom, the GPA of the whole class goes up over the next year. And it's been very gratifying. We started 16 years ago with 25 scholarships in Maryland. Now we've given out more than 5,000, and we're in all 50 states. But we also put in reading rooms. These are fascinating places that no little kid could possibly pass up. And they get points for the amount of time they spend in their reading, the number of books that they read, and they can trade them in for prizes. In the beginning, they do it for the prizes, but it doesn't take long before their academic performance begins to improve. And we particularly target Title I schools, where kids come from homes with no books, and they go to schools with no libraries. Those are the ones who drop out. And we need to truncate that process early on, because we can't afford to waste any of those young people. You know, for every one of those people that we keep from going down that path of self-destruction and mediocrity, that's one less person you have to protect yourself and your family from. One less person you have to pay for in the penal or the welfare system. One more tax-paying, productive member of society who may invent a new energy source or come up with a cure for cancer. They're all important to us, and we need every single one of them. It makes a difference. And when you go home tonight, please read about it. Carson Scholars Fund. CarsonScholars.org. But why is it so important that we educate our people? Because we don't want to go down the same pathway as many other pinnacle nations who have preceded us. I think particularly about ancient Rome. Very powerful. Nobody could even challenge them militarily. But what happened to them? They destroyed themselves from within. Moral decay. Fiscal irresponsibility. They destroyed themselves. And if you don't think that can happen to America, you get out your books and you start reading. But you know, we can fix it. Why can we fix it? Because we're smart. What about our taxation system? So complex. There is no one who can possibly comply with every jot and tittle of our tax. If I wanted to get you or you, I could get you on a tax issue. That doesn't make any sense. What we need to do is come up with something that's simple. And when I pick up my Bible, you know what I see? I see the fairest individual in the universe, God, and He's given us a system. It's called tithe. Now, we don't necessarily have to do it 10%, but it's principle. He didn't say, if your crops fail, don't give me any tithes. He didn't say, if you have a bumper crop, give me triple tithes. So there must be something inherently fair about proportionality. You make $10 billion, you put in $1 billion. You make $10, you put in $1. Of course, you got to get rid of the loopholes. But now some people say, well, that's not fair. because it doesn't hurt the guy who made $10 billion as much as the guy who made 10. Where does it say you have to hurt the guy? He just put $1 billion in the pot. We don't need to hurt him. It's that kind of thinking. It's that kind of thinking that has resulted in 602 banks in the Cayman Islands. That money needs to be back here, building our infrastructure and creating jobs. And we're smart enough to figure out how to do that. We've already started down the path of solving one of the other big problems, healthcare. We need to have good healthcare for everybody. It's the most important thing that a person can have. Money means nothing, titles means nothing when you don't have your health. But we got to figure out efficient ways to do it. We spend a lot of money on healthcare, twice as much per capita as anybody else in the world, and yet not very efficient. What can we do? Here's my solution. When the person is born, give them a birth certificate, an electronic medical record, and a health savings account, to which money can be contributed pre-tax from the time you're born to the time you die. When you die, you can pass it on to your family members so that when you're 85 years old and you got 6 diseases, you're not trying to spend up everything. You're happy to pass it on, and there's nobody talking about death panels. That's number one. And also, for the people who are indigent, who don't have any money, we can make contributions to their HSA each month because we already have this huge pot of money. Instead of sending it to some bureaucracy, let's put it in their HSAs. Now they have some control over their own health care. And what do you think they're going to do? They're going to learn very quickly how to be responsible. When Mr. Jones gets that diabetic foot ulcer, he's not going to the emergency room and blowing a big chunk of it. He's going to go to the clinic. He learns that very quickly. Gets the same treatment. In the emergency room, they send him out. In the clinic, they say, now let's get your diabetes under control so you're not back here in 3 weeks with another problem. That's how we begin to solve these kinds of problems. It's much more complex than that, and I don't have time to go into it all, but we can do all of these things. And I want to close with this story. 200 years ago, this nation was involved in a war, the War of 1812. The British, who are now our good friends, thought that we were young whippersnappers. It was time for us to become a colony again. They were winning that war, marching up the eastern seaboard, destroying city after city, destroyed Washington, D.C., burned down the White House. Next stop, Baltimore. As they came into the Chesapeake Bay, that armada of ships, warships, as far as the eye could see, it was looking grim. Fort McHenry standing right there. General Armistead, who was in charge of Fort McHenry, had a large American flag commissioned to fly in front of the fort. The admiral in charge of the British fleet was offended. He said, take that flag down. You have until dusk to take that flag down. If you don't take it down, we will reduce you to ashes. There was a young amateur poet on board by the name of Francis Scott Key, sent by President Madison to try to obtain the release of an American physician who was being held captive. He overheard the British plans. They were not going to let him off the ship. He mourned as dusk approached. He mourned for his fledgling young nation. And as the sun fell, the bombardment started. Bombs bursting in air, missiles, so much debris. He strained trying to see, was the flag still there? Couldn't see a thing. All night long it continued. At the crack of dawn, he ran out to the banister. He looked, straining his eyes, but all he could see was dust and debris. And then there was a clearing, and he beheld the most beautiful sight he'd ever seen. The torn and tattered stars and stripes still waving. And many historians say that was the turning point in the War of 1812. We went on to win that war and to retain our freedom. And if you had gone into the grounds of Fort McHenry that day, you would have seen at the base of that flag the bodies of soldiers who took turns propping up that flag. They would not let that flag go down because they believed in what that flag symbolized. And what did it symbolize? One nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. God bless.
I think what is required for leadership is wisdom and the ability to assemble
an appropriate team, ability to listen, and an ability to make wise decisions.
Ben Carson rose from childhood in poverty in Detroit to become a world-renowned neurosurgeon and best-selling author. Now he's taking on an even greater challenge. The retired neurosurgeon has tried to turn his lack of political experience into one of his biggest selling points.
I don't want to be a politician because politicians do what is politically expedient. And I want to do what's right.
Carson met his wife Candy when they were students at Yale. They eventually moved to Baltimore, where as a neurosurgeon at Johns Hopkins, Carson became world-renowned for his ability to separate conjoined twins and to successfully perform the most complex brain surgeries.
You know, my whole professional career was centered around quality of life for children. And I must say I was looking very much forward to retirement. After a very arduous career. My wife was really looking forward to it. But then I started thinking, can I just walk away with their future in jeopardy the way that it is? We're in such a critical situation right now that I can't just hope. I really need to do something.
What do you think is the #1 issue facing the country right now?
There are 3 things that threaten to destroy us. And that's our divisiveness. A house divided against itself cannot stand. It is our fiscal irresponsibility that threatens to destroy the future quickly. And it is our failure to take a leadership role on the world stage, which allows the creation of many bad actors to fill that void. And for every day that goes by when we don't take a leadership role, it's going to cost us.
Economy, taxes, what would President Carson do?
I would want a tax structure that is truly fair. I would like to see a system that hits everybody basically in the same way, proportionately. So you make $10 billion a year, you pay $1 billion. You make $10 a year, you pay $1.
A flat tax between 10 and 15%, no loopholes, lower corporate taxes, and Carson would repatriate money companies have overseas.
A 6-month tax holiday so we can bring back the $2+ trillion overseas with only one stipulation, and that is that 10% of it would have to be used for job creation.
Carson sees ISIS in Iraq and Syria as a serious national security threat.
We have 2 choices. We can sit there and just kind of disregard them and say they're not that big and important. Or we can destroy them first using every mechanism available to us.
Let me make it extremely clear that I am extremely pro-Second Amendment. There's no question about it, and I would never allow for anybody to tamper with that right, because it is so important. Why do we have the Second Amendment? It was because our founders recognized that if our nation was invaded, if the citizenry had the ability to aid the military, we would be a much more formidable group of people. And that seems kind of far-fetched these days, but maybe it's not so far-fetched. The second reason for the Second Amendment was so that the people would be able to defend themselves against an overly aggressive government that wanted to exact tyranny in this country, and we don't ever want to see that happen. One of the things that we are going to have to do as a country is when we have military conflicts, we have got to let the military people loose. We cannot micromanage them. We also need to recognize that we are allowing our military to deteriorate. Our Navy is the smallest size since 1917. We're in danger of becoming a regional Navy when we have to be able to project power all over the world. We have international interests, but a Navy that is shrinking. You know, our equipment is in a deteriorating state. The heart of our personnel is being eaten out by things like sequestration, cutting beyond the fat into the muscle and the bone. Our captains and majors and lieutenant colonels are being told they're not being renewed. These are people we've invested enormous amounts of effort into, who were to become the next tier, the next generation of leadership in our military, and we're dismissing them. That is hurting us. The morale is going down, and our military is moving this way, and those who wish to destroy us are moving that way. It's a perfect storm. We cannot let that happen. We have to get new leadership. Beside my medical career, I've had lots of instances where people said to me, "No one's ever done this before." That doesn't bother me at all, because, I have a feeling that there is a power that's greater than me. And I always say, I can do all things through Christ, which strengthens me.